Out of the Menendez brothers, the Los Angeles District Attorney says he plans to announce his decision on a possible resentencing by the end of the week.
Just a normal kid.
Oh, Eric, you're a normal kid who killed your parents.
I killed my parents.
After rotting in jail for 35 long years for murdering their parents in cold blood, the Menendez brothers are finally getting a shot at redemption. This time, it is not just their lawyers fighting for them. Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon is actually backing them up and pushing for a resentencing. But why exactly do the Menendez brothers deserve a second chance? And why does the DA, who once stood firmly against them, now want to get them a new shot at life? The cold-blooded murder. Before we tell you the reasons, you have to understand the backstory of a crime that shocked the nation. This is the story of the Menendez brothers, Lyle and Eric, who went from living in luxury to spending the rest of their lives behind bars. But what really happened? Lyle and Eric Menendez were born into privilege. Their father, Jose Menendez, was a wealthy Cuban-American business executive who had worked his way up from humble beginnings. By the 1980s, he was a powerful entertainment mogul living in Beverly Hills. Their mother, Kitty, was a former school teacher who had settled into the role of a Beverly Hills housewife. With Jose's wealth, the family lived a life of luxury, which included mansions, private schools, tennis lessons, and fancy cars. But behind the wealth, things were not so perfect. Jose was known to be a strict, controlling father. He would always demand perfection from his sons in everything they did. Lyle, the older brother, was expected to be the leader, the one who would follow in his father's footsteps and achieve success. Eric, the younger, was seen as the sensitive one, struggling to meet his father's expectations. By the late 1980s, the Menendez household was filled with tension. Lyle had dropped out of Princeton, and Eric's grades were not much to brag about. Jose's expectations weighed heavily on both brothers, and the pressure to live up to the Menendez name was intense. According to later accounts, there were secrets within the family that would eventually spill out in court. Secrets about the dark and abusive side of Jose Menendez that no one outside the family knew about. Yet from the outside, the Menendez family seemed like they had it all. They were part of the Beverly Hills elite, attending fancy events and throwing lavish parties. No one could have imagined the horror that was about to unfold. Then came the horrible night of August 20th, 1989, when everything came crashing down. Lyle and Eric Menendez did the unthinkable.
What do you believe was the originating cause of you and your brother ultimately winding up shooting your parents?
The brothers shot their parents, Jose and Kitty, in cold blood in the living room of their Beverly Hills mansion. It was a brutal murder. Jose was shot in the back of the head while watching TV, killing him instantly. Kitty tried to run, but she was shot multiple times until she collapsed, covered in blood. In total, the brothers fired 15 rounds, making sure there was no chance their parents would survive. After the shooting, Lyle and Eric drove off, leaving the bodies of their parents in the blood-soaked living room. They returned hours later, pretending to discover the bodies, and made a frantic 911 call, crying and claiming they had just walked in on the scene. At first, the police were not looking at Lyle and Eric as suspects. The murders were so violent, so over the top, that investigators initially thought it might have been a mob hit. Jose was a high-profile executive, and they assumed that maybe he had made some dangerous enemies. But things started to seem off. For one, the brothers didn't act like grieving sons. Within days of the murders, Lyle and Eric went on a massive spending spree. They bought luxury cars, designer clothes, Rolex watches, and even invested in a restaurant. They were living like they had hit the lottery instead of mourning their parents' deaths. And then there were the inconsistencies in their stories. The brothers could not keep their timeline straight, and they appeared way too calm for kids who had just lost their parents in such a violent way. The investigators were starting to have doubts. It all came crashing down when Eric made a huge mistake, he confessed to his therapist. Apparently, guilt got the better of him, and he told Dr. Jerome Oziel everything. But things took an unexpected turn when Lyle found out about Eric's confession. Lyle stormed into the therapist's office, furious, and threatened Oziel's life if he ever told anyone about Eric's confession. Well, Oziel didn't keep quiet. He confided in his girlfriend, who went to the police. That was the break investigators needed. In March 1990, 7 months after the murders, both Lyle and Eric were arrested and charged with the murders of their parents. The trial that followed was pure courtroom drama. It grabbed headlines everywhere. The Menendez brothers were now the main characters in a real-life crime story that the media could not get enough of. Cameras were allowed in the courtroom, turning the trial into must-see TV. The prosecution's case was that Lyle and Eric were spoiled rich kids who killed their parents for money. They argued that the brothers wanted access to their parents' multi-million-dollar estate and had planned the murders for months. They even showed evidence that the brothers had bought shotguns weeks before the murders, pointing to premeditation. But then, the defense made a convincing argument. They didn't deny that Lyle and Eric had killed their parents, but they argued it was not about money at all. Instead, they painted a picture of a family living in terror. The defense claimed that Jose Menendez was a violent, abusive father who had sexually and emotionally abused his sons for years. They said the boys were pushed to the edge, driven by fear and desperation after years of torment. The details were graphic and horrifying, and the brothers broke down in tears as they described their father's abuse. This testimony split the courtroom and the nation. Some believed the brothers, sympathizing with them as victims of a monster father. Others thought it was all a ploy to gain sympathy and avoid punishment. The jurors were deadlocked in the first trial, leading to a mistrial in 1993.
Murder of Jose Menendez, a human being, for financial gain while lying in wait with a firearm.
Then came the second trial in 1995. It was a completely different story. This time, the judge didn't allow the defense to present as much evidence about the alleged abuse. This narrowed the focus to the murders themselves. The brothers' claims about their father's behavior were mostly sidelined, and the prosecution hammered home the point that the murders were premeditated and driven by greed.
You are further charged with special circumstances for which you could be sentenced to death.
Without the same level of emotional testimony, the jury found both Lyle and Eric guilty of first-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the conviction, Lyle and Eric were sent to separate maximum security prisons, and for years their story faded from the public eye. They lived out their sentences quietly, far from the media frenzy that once surrounded them. In 2018, after nearly 20 years apart, the brothers were reunited in the same facility, where they now serve their life sentences together. Now over 30 years behind bars, the Menendez brothers' case has taken a surprising turn. It is not every day you hear about a district attorney pushing for a lesser sentence for two men convicted of murdering their parents in cold blood. Yet that is exactly what happened. So what was this recent announcement all about? Why did it happen now? The shocking announcement by the district attorney.
Lyle and Eric Menendez should be resentenced 3 decades after the murder of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez. They received life without the possibility of parole. He believes.
Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon recently said that he was recommending that Lyle and Eric Menendez be resentenced. What does that mean exactly? Well, instead of spending the rest of their lives in prison without the possibility of parole, Gascon suggested that their sentences be changed to life with the possibility of parole. This would not automatically set them free, but it would allow them to go before a parole board and potentially earn their release after 3 decades in prison. So why the sudden change? What makes this case different now than it was when the brothers were convicted back in the 1990s? Gascon said he didn't make this decision lightly. He acknowledged right from the start that the murders were brutal and unforgivable. There were 15 rounds fired at their parents, including multiple shots to the head and body. There is no denying that the crime was horrific, but Gascon made it clear that his recommendation for resentencing was not about excusing the original act. It was about considering who the Menendez brothers had become after 3 decades behind bars. He requested to consider their age at the time of the crime. Lyle was 21 and Eric was only 19 when they committed the murders. Gascon emphasized that under today's legal standards, youthful offenders, those under 26, are often treated differently because their brains are still developing. The DA argued that this should be considered, especially given how the brothers have changed over time. Next, according to Gascon, the brothers' behavior in prison has been exemplary. They have shown remorse, stayed out of trouble, and dedicated themselves to self-improvement. The DA pointed out that they didn't use their time in prison to join gangs or cause problems. Instead, they got involved in positive activities, like pursuing education and helping other inmates. He also revealed that over the years, Lyle and Eric have not only improved themselves, but have also worked to make life better for those around them. They have created support groups to help other inmates deal with trauma and started initiatives to improve the prison environment. Their work with the Green Space Project, for example, has been highlighted as an effort to make prisons more humane and supportive environments. One of the biggest arguments in favor of resentencing is how the brothers have conducted themselves over the past 30 years. In a world where many prisoners fall into the cycle of violence or give up hope, Lyle and Eric have taken a very different path. Lyle became involved in educational programs, eventually earning a degree while in prison. He also took on leadership roles in inmate groups, focusing on topics like conflict resolution and personal development. Eric, meanwhile, used his time to help inmates dealing with emotional trauma, becoming an advocate for mental health support behind bars. These contributions have earned them a reputation as model inmates, something that's not easy to achieve in the harsh environment of a maximum security prison. According to some correctional officers, Lyle and Eric's efforts have made a real difference in the lives of fellow inmates, and their work has been seen as sincere and impactful. While the DA's recommendation carries a lot of weight, the voices of the Menendez family members have also played a role in this push for resentencing. In fact, more than 24 relatives, including some of Jose and Kitty's own family members, have come forward in support of the brothers' release. They argue that 35 years in prison is enough, and that the brothers have paid their debt to society. One of the reasons this announcement is happening now has a lot to do with renewed media attention. In recent years, documentaries and TV series about the Menendez brothers have reignited public interest in the case. Shows like Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story on Netflix, have brought the story to a new generation. This has raised questions about the original trials and the fairness of the verdicts. Social media has also played a part, with celebrities like Kim Kardashian voicing their support for the brothers' release. They have argued that the abuse allegations were never fully understood back in the 1990s. These high-profile endorsements have created a wave of public sympathy, putting pressure on the DA's office to reconsider the case. This surge of interest led to a motion filed by the Menendez brothers themselves in May 2023. In this motion, they brought forward what they described as new evidence, pointing to additional details about the abuse they suffered and questioning the fairness of their original trial. Gascon mentioned that his office had been reviewing this case for over a year before making the decision to support resentencing. So do they really deserve a second chance?
35 years. Enough is enough is enough. Thank you.
The case of the Menendez brothers is far from simple, and public opinion is sharply divided. On one side, supporters believe that Lyle and Eric have earned a chance at freedom after 3 decades behind bars. On the other, critics insist that the brutality of their crime can never be forgiven, and they should remain locked away for life. You see, for years, the Menendez case was seen as a clear-cut example of greed and violence. But now opinions are shifting, and the public is more divided than ever. Supporters of the Menendez brothers argue that the justice system is supposed to be about more than just punishment. It is about rehabilitation. And in their eyes, Lyle and Eric have genuinely changed. They point to the brothers' behavior in prison, where they have been model inmates for decades. They have stayed out of trouble, pursued higher education, and dedicated themselves to helping other inmates. Many of their advocates believe these actions show sincere remorse and growth. Another major point for supporters is the abuse that the brothers allegedly suffered at the hands of their father, Jose Menendez. During their trials, both Lyle and Eric gave emotional testimony about the physical and sexual abuse they endured throughout their childhood. They claimed that their father's controlling and abusive behavior drove them to commit the murders out of sheer fear and desperation. While this defense was not enough to sway the second jury, supporters believe that today's understanding of trauma would lead to a different verdict. They argue that the brothers were victims long before they became perpetrators, and that their abusive past should be considered when evaluating their actions. Many supporters also emphasize that Lyle and Eric were very young when the crime occurred. They were 21 and 19 years old, respectively. Research has shown that young people's brains are still developing, making them more impulsive and less able to foresee long-term consequences. Supporters argue that youthful offenders should be given a chance to prove they have changed, especially when they have shown evidence of rehabilitation. In today's legal system, it is possible that their age at the time of the crime would have led to a different sentence, something less severe than life without parole. Finally, supporters argue that 35 years in prison is a long time to pay for a crime, no matter how horrific. They believe that Lyle and Eric have served enough time, especially considering their exemplary behavior and the positive impact they've had on the prison community. They say the brothers have demonstrated a genuine desire to make amends and that it's time to give them a shot at life outside prison walls. Critics, however, are quick to remind everyone just how brutal the Menendez murders were. Lyle and Eric didn't just murder their parents, they shot them 15 times, including multiple shots to the head and body. The violence was extreme and deliberate, with Eric even reloading his gun to make sure the job was done. For those who oppose resentencing, this is not just about two scared kids. It involved cold-blooded murderers. Opponents also point to the brothers' behavior immediately after the murders. Instead of mourning, they went on a spending spree, blowing through their parents' fortune like it was pocket change. They bought Rolex watches, luxury cars, designer clothes, and even opened a restaurant. Critics see this as a clear sign of their true motive, which was greed. They argue that their actions after the crime don't line up with a story of desperate sons trying to escape an abusive father. Instead, they see it as proof that the brothers planned the murders to get access to their parents' wealth. While the defense's story of abuse was emotional and persuasive to some, not everyone buys it. Critics argue that the claims of abuse were exaggerated or even fabricated to gain sympathy and avoid a harsher sentence. They point out that the details of the alleged abuse were inconsistent and much of the evidence was circumstantial. For them, the focus should remain on the murders themselves, not on the brothers' portrayal as victims. So what is going to happen next? The recent push for resentencing does not mean that Lyle and Eric are about to walk free. There is still a long legal process ahead, and nothing is guaranteed. The first step is for a judge to review the district attorney's recommendation for resentencing. The judge will look at all the evidence, including the brothers' behavior in prison, their history, and the impact of their crime on the family. The judge's decision will determine whether Lyle and Eric will be given the opportunity to be resentenced and possibly considered for parole. If the judge approves the resentencing, it means Lyle and Eric's sentences will change from life without parole to life with the possibility of parole. This does not guarantee their release, but it opens the door for a parole hearing, which will be a major milestone for the brothers. At the parole hearing, the board will evaluate their prison records, their contributions to the prison community, and any signs of genuine remorse and rehabilitation. The parole board's job is to determine whether Lyle and Eric would be a danger to society if released. They will hear from supporters, opponents, and surviving family members. They will review reports from psychologists, examine the brothers' behavior over the past 30 years, and weigh the impact of their potential release. If they decide that Lyle and Eric are no longer a threat and have paid their debt to society, they could recommend release. If the Menendez brothers are granted parole, it won't mean instant freedom. There are several conditions that would come with their release. First of all, they would have to follow strict parole guidelines, including regular check-ins, mandatory counseling, and possibly restrictions on where they can live and work. Other than that, after 35 years in prison, adjusting to life outside won't be easy. The world has changed dramatically since they went behind bars, and they would need significant support to reintegrate into society. And then, even if they are released, they will likely remain under the watchful eye of the media and the public. Any misstep or questionable action would be heavily scrutinized, and the controversy surrounding their case would follow them for the rest of their lives. In the end, the judge's decision, and if it comes to it, the parole board's ruling, will have far-reaching consequences. Whether they are granted a second chance or not, this case has already started a wider conversation about what it means to truly pay for one's crimes and whether some people, no matter what they have done, can ever be forgiven. What is your opinion on all of this? Should the jury consider resentencing the Menendez brothers? Let us know in the comments below. If you want more shocking updates on this case, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.